to your town hall last night, and I can help with the answers about Sheridan. I'll follow up with you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, it's 7:30. I'm going to go ahead and get started because we do have pretty big agenda today. So welcome everyone to the October NATA meeting. So we'll go ahead and start with approval of the September 30th meeting minutes.
If I can interject before we approve, there's a correction to the minutes. Brenda Schuler of Northwest Parkway is a member of Smart Commute and was shown as a consultant who's an attendee. So just wanted to make sure that that's changed in the minutes. Other than that, the minutes are as presented.
Okay. So with that change, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. This is Julie.
Second, this is Joan.
Thank you, Julie and Joan. Any questions? All right, we'll go ahead and accept the minutes. Let's go ahead and move on to item 3, which is updates to the priority projects list. I don't know if we've received any new updates to that since the last time.
We have not, Madam Chair, but I guess if there are any that would like to be brought to the floor, maybe we can consider it for next month. I'm not sure, but I have not received any up until this morning.
Okay. So if anybody out there has any of those updates that you want to send in, go ahead and get those to Carson. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on to item 4. So discussion of the 2022 NATA leadership slate, and we'll vote on that in December.
We're looking for, as we move this forward, Joan, Councilmember Peck will be the chair. Mayor Seitz would be the vice chair, and we're looking for someone to fit into that treasurer spot. Typically in the past, and we talked about this at SPC, we try to have a broad swath, and we always have an elected official in these positions of leadership. We're looking for someone from Commerce City, Erie, Brighton, Broomfield, Federal Heights, one of the areas that we don't already have representation in the executive committee.
Are you looking for nominations or just want people to reach out to you?
Yes, if they'd like to reach out.
Good. Yeah, Americano. Yeah.
Oh, Karen, you're on mute.
If they would just reach out to us, Carson or I, then we'll get it on the slate for December. As you remember, we don't have a November meeting.
Okay, so any of those communities, if you have interest, go ahead and reach out to Karen or Carson. All right, we'll move on to item 5, which is Smart Commute updates.
Carson, this one's yours, I think.
That's right. Sorry about that. I muted everybody quickly there, so that's why you got muted, Karen. We at Smart Commute have been doing a summer's worth of outreach, and we decided we wanted to use our fall to do some more outreach as we're able to get back out there in the community and do some inline and other North Metro area outreach for the RTD. We have presented here a series of slides or a series of locations where we will be offering hot chocolate, just saying thank you for riding and asking some questions of riders all along the inline, and then obviously at Wagon Road Park and Ride and at the Thornton Park and Ride throughout the month of November and December. Some of these early times will just be peak commuter times, early in the morning, later in the afternoon. And then as we get into December, we're going to try to target the Parade of Lights riders on a Saturday that'll be going down, and then a Sunday Broncos home game for looking for robust ridership to get some good input, and just thank those folks that are getting out there and helping those inline ridership numbers bump up. we would ask that if you have any upcoming outreach events or any events you would like us to come to as Smart Commute, we'd be more than happy to do that. Just please let us know. That's all.
Thank you, Carson. Any questions for Carson? I don't see any, so we'll go ahead and move right into item 6, which is the RTD Director's Reports.
Well, Vince, you usually start, and I think that's a good thing to continue. We've got several members on and most of senior staff, so we've got a full contingent, so we ought to be able to answer any question today, but go ahead and start, Vince.
We do, and we also have our board chair, Angie Rivera Melpieti, on as well. So I had my telephone town hall last night, and I guess Deborah Baskett listened in. I hope that wasn't too painful for you, but it was interesting. Some good questions. N-Line, I think, is pretty interesting. Ridership is increasing month by month, and for the period January to August, ridership is up 83%. So we're doing pretty well. If you go by that East Lake Park and Ride, there's a lot of cars parked there. So happy about that. Other than that, that's all I have, Madam Chair, if anybody else wants to talk.
Well, I would assume the group would like to have a short update from Deborah or Michael Davies in regards to the Adams County Justice Center stop. And obviously there's some other conversations from our Boulder County contingent, and I see Lynn's here and the chair's here, as well as several staff members. So Madam Chair, if I could turn my portion of the time over to Deborah, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Troy.
Good
Good morning, Deborah.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning to all that are assembled. Yes, as it relates to the Adams County Justice Center, I would just like to share that we have been working collaboratively and cooperatively. And as relates to having a permanent solution in conjunction with the city of Brighton as well as Adams County, it appears as if we'll have a stop on Bromley Lane done by the end of the year. I am working in tandem with the Adams County county manager, and we're looking to memorialize that in the next few days. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate having the dialogue here in this forum that brought us to the place where we could engage and have a mitigating solution. So that's where we are with Adams County.
Any questions for Deborah on that? I don't see any hands, so maybe Troy, you want to weigh in?
Well, just a little qualifier. It appears we will have kind of a temporary situation, and then the permanent a little bit later on with stops on Bromley, if I'm not mistaken, Deborah. So it'll still be a two-step process, correct?
Well, case in point, when I talked about the stop being done at the end of the year, that is a permanent stop.
Right.
Right. And we're still servicing the area now. So I just wanted to qualify that. So thank you, Director Whitmore.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, this is Adam Cushing. Is there a temporary solution in place now?
So basically, we're still stopping on Bromley Lane. The temporary solution, once I have an understanding of the time frame specifically for the construction, what we'll have to do is do some mitigation to provide smaller size vehicles. I will have to work with a contractor in order to do that. And so until I know the specific dates, I can't leverage that contract amendment. So the temporary solution would be to run smaller vehicles instead of a 40-foot standard bus. We would be running a 30-foot bus, but we have to do a swap out, and I need to know the time certain which to effectuate that.
Okay, so they're not able to use the old stop in the interim.
Yes, they are, sir. For clarification, that's why I need a smaller size vehicle, because turning radii, that was difficult, as I shared before, to maneuver. That's why I have to do a bus swap.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
And it looks like we also have a question from Janet in Adams County. Go ahead, Janet.
Oh, yes, Janet. Great. She's been working with us.
Yeah, Janet Lundquist for Adams County Public Works. I was just going to give a brief update. I was about to send an email out to all the group with a construction update, but we're anticipating we're going to have construction completed on the south side of Bromley Lane within the next 2.5 weeks or so. So we're really trucking as far as construction goes. So we will probably be done by Thanksgiving. With the construction of the new bus stop on Bromley Lane on the south side of the roadway. So just to put that out there, and Deborah will obviously have to adjust her side of it, but construction side, we'll have construction here in the next over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Janet.
All right, I don't see any other hands up, but I see Lynn took her mute off, so go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, just briefly. We have a separate, I see you have a separate update for the Boulder County RTD arrangements next, so I won't get into that. We had a final meeting of the Accountability Committee. I think it went very well. You may have heard some of this. I missed the more recent meetings, but from Julie, but we're working towards spare the air days when ozone limits are exceeded, that we would be having free fares. And I think that's an exciting development that Deborah Johnson has been working on. And I think the local service councils are the other big item from that accountability committee that will be moving forward. And that's all I have. Thanks.
And I see Eric also.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll give a brief update, and as with Lynn, I'll save the Boulder County correspondence for the next agenda item. I just would add that this past week, the board did pass our new service run board for January. The thing I would highlight for the group is I think we're all struggling, and certainly it's an unfortunate situation that we're dealing with the workforce shortages that we are all nationally. That's becoming one of the limiters for us. So certainly there's still a number of routes where ridership is a limiter. Right now, our workforce shortage is serving to be one of the limitations we have to restoring service. So from a few months ago, you may recall we did pass our strategic plan focused on several areas. One of the priorities and outcomes for the agency is maximizing employee ownership, employee satisfaction. We did get an update this week from Ms. Johnson and from her staff. We are doing a number of things to improve RTD as a place to work, and that's going to play into how we bring back workforce for the long haul to restore service. The other thing I'll highlight is this past week, RTD did also pass a restructure of our committees for next year. So we'll be a little bit leaner and stronger on our committees moving forward. So thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Thanks, Eric. And Lynn, I like the spare the air. That's a nice way to put it. So I guess we'll look forward to that coming out. And I think it's also interesting that we're going to have this option for smaller buses. I know that's always been a topic of discussion up here for us. So I look forward to seeing how that works out in Brighton. Any questions for anybody on RTD? I don't see any hands up, and
Madam Chair,
anybody waving. Yes, Deborah, go ahead.
If I can just clarify, when we talk about the smaller vehicles, we're utilizing those smaller vehicles because we're navigating an arterial that really isn't equipped to handle a 40-foot bus. So I do just want to manage expectations as we go forward.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any hands, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is 7. And so this came about because I think we all read the newspaper article last week regarding CDOT withholding funds from RTD, primarily for service routes to Boulder County. And so I think, that always raises a flag for those of us up here when it seems like all of us have had service cuts, but nobody from RTD or CDOT was in the newspaper having funds withheld. So I see Karen's hand up, and maybe she can help us through this a little bit as we get into this discussion.
Thank you. Well, I'm willing to do a disclaimer here on behalf of the Transportation Commission. This was not something that came through the Transportation Commission. This was directly from the executive director at CDOT who started this conversation, and it was a surprise to the Transportation Commission until we read it in the paper as well. So sometimes it's very confusing for the public. They know that there is there's a commission at the Transportation Department that makes policy and provides budgetary advice and approval. And it's sometimes confused with what the executive management team at CDOT is. And I just wanted to be clear that none of us on the Transportation Commission knew anything about this this situation brewing with Boulder County until we read it in the paper. I think that it's working to resolve, but just wanted to have a disclaimer at the top. I had people texting me and calling me and asking me about what CDOT was doing in regard to this. So just wanted a disclaimer here, and I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you. So again, I think it raises a lot of questions and a lot of red flags when CDOT is going to pick one community over the rest of us who have also lost service to withheld funds. So I don't know where that came from, or if anyone on CDOT is on this call that can maybe provide some sort of clarity. It would be wonderful to understand how can the rest of us get that kind of option to bring back service. Commissioner Mauricio, I don't know if you have anything. I don't know if you're just off mute. Okay, he's back on mute. All right, Kathleen, go ahead.
Great. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to join in the conversation. I'm Kathleen Brackey with Boulder County staff. And I don't know if anyone's on the call from CDOT, and I can't speak for the CDOT staff, but I just wanted to create some clarification that the funding that we are talking about and related to the service restoration request is some specific federal ARPA funding, so American Relief Program funding that was specifically identified for geographic areas within Boulder County. And so that is the funding that we were discussing and looking to work with RTD and work with CDOT and the local communities within Boulder County that these funds were intended to serve in terms of federal COVID relief dollars for transit. So I just want to create some clarity around the specific funding and why Boulder County was involved in these conversations.
Thanks, Kathleen. I guess the question then would be the geographic funding for that, primarily in Boulder County. What are the criteria for that? Was it something to do with low income, diversity? Because all of us in all of our cities can probably testify that we have probably a significant a number of residents that would fall into those criteria as well. So I guess we're trying to understand how that came about, again, that CDOT would withhold funds from one community versus the rest of us who have lost service for years or have even less service available with lots of essential workforce and primary jobs in each of our communities. So I don't know if you have that criteria, if you want to go down that, or if somebody is on the phone from CDOT that could answer those questions.
I don't know if someone is on the call from CDOT. If they are, that would be great if they would like to answer. And again, I agree that all of our communities across the entire metro area are struggling, and we're all trying to come back through COVID, and people are coming back to the workplace. And it's very important to restore transit service across the district. That's very important. The particular funding that we're discussing is actually designated through the Federal Transit Administration, and they have a formula. It's all formula-based funding for specific what they call small urbanized areas. And those small urbanized areas are designated by the Federal Transit Administration, and it's based on population and density and a variety of other factors. I'm not an expert in Federal Transit Administration formulas by any means, but the specific funding was identified by FTA for the urbanized areas of Longmont, Boulder, and then a small combined UZA or urbanized area that includes Erie, Lafayette, and Louisville. So those were 3 specific designated geographic areas by the Federal Transit Administration that had identified this ARPA funding for transit service. So it's a very specific, unique situation to have these 3 specific areas identified by FTA. We didn't make a designation through Boulder County. This was done as the ARPA funding was allocated by Congress. So again, I won't speak for FTA or CDOT. We're just, trying to make sure that these dollars that were identified for these geographic areas for transit are receiving the transit service commensurate with that.
Thanks, Kathleen. And I don't want to throw you under the bus either. I'm sure it wasn't all on Boulder. I see Malcolm's hand and Joan's hand.
Thank you, Chair. My comments, I'm not going to defend or condemn what CDOT did. I think what it illustrates, along with all the conversations we've been having on other issues, is that we're all fighting over too small of a pie and slicing it up. And the key issue is there's not enough funding to provide the transportation services that everybody needs. And we should be working together to figure out how we can bring more funding to do the things that everybody wants.
Thanks, Malcolm. Joan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question actually is for Deborah Johnson. Even though I am very happy to have service restored in Longmont, when I hear about the shortage of drivers, et cetera, how will this affect some of the rural areas? Are you going to have to, and this may be a presumptuous question, how will you fulfill that request to bring back service to this area without having enough drivers? Are you going to have to pull those off of other underserved areas as we work through this?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Madam Chair, if I'm.
Mr. Davidson.
Deborah, yeah.
Mr. Davidson, did you want to say something?
I was going to end up handing the ball off to you anyway. I was just going to thank Councilmember Peck for the question. That is the type of consideration that is very challenging right now and very important. And thank you, Mr. Fleming, for highlighting I think all of us here want the same thing for transportation. So given the situation we are with resources, that's exactly the kind of thinking that I think is appropriate, and I appreciate the question. And Ms. Johnson, you've got the details, so I'll hand it off to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davidson. Councilmember Peck, thank you for the question. And to Ms. Brackey's point, there are some qualifiers. I want to ensure that everybody understands about the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. This money that was designated is actually reimbursable funds. And so there's no money readily available because there's qualifiers in which one needs to actually submit to be reimbursed for. And as it relates to the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the monies that have been allocated nationwide were $30.46 billion for public transportation, and that remains available till September 30th, 2024. And as specified, the funds are available at 100% federal share. They're available for payroll and operations unless the recipient can certify that it has not furloughed any employees. It's available for payroll for public transit providers, including private providers of public transportation, and operating costs of public transit during the public health emergency, including the purchase of personal protective equipment. And it's also available for administrative leave for operations or contractor personnel due to reductions in service. So I just wanted to make everybody aware that this is not money that's readily available currently. You have to submit to be reimbursed and ensure that it qualifies under the parameters as I just specified. So recognizing where we are relative to Boulder County and CDOT, there's still a process in place where there has to be coordination with the FTA to have these funds basically become eligible, because there's a myriad of different steps. So to your question, Councilmember Peck, about, equity, we look at, the Civil Rights Act of the Civil Rights Act of 1965, and then basically Title VI in and of that, which is about equity. There has to be a service equity plan that stood up, no matter who is doing it, if you're a federal recipient. So there's quite a bit of steps, and I don't want to misstep in speaking collectively for the Federal Transit Administration, but there's some steps that have to take part. And in relationship to this, to the point that Mr. Davidson raised, we're in the midst of the Great Resignation. I don't want to sound as if I'm being a little preachy here, but we all know that we're in the midst of this unprecedented crisis per se. And as of September, 4.3 million people in America have lost their jobs. So whether they're RTD personnel or contracted personnel, the issue still remains relative to not having candidates to source to provide services. So as it stands right now, RTD would not be taking services from another area, because basically this is a little presumptuous, because we have yet to know what the path forward is clearly.
Thank you for that explanation. And it makes it much clearer and much more satisfactory that there is a process. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I guess, so Commissioner Mauricio left a message in the chat just asking if we could also see that equity plan. Again, I think the optics of this is not good in general for us up here, regardless of whatever the criteria or reimbursement or whatever it is. We've been fighting for this for such a long time. Karen, comments?
Oh, thank you. Just wondering if someone from RTD could maybe describe how the 5307 funds are distributed. I know Deborah started to talk about that a little bit, but just for the rest of us who don't understand that process. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. For clarification, when we talk about how they're distributed or how we're utilizing, just a point of clarity on the question.
Perhaps both. I think the distribution is important, given Chair Sangren's questions and Commissioner, or I just moved you into Commissioner, Councilmember Peck asked, and then I think the follow-up with how they're distributed would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so basically at a very high level, as indicated in previous comments, the urbanized areas are determined by census data. And as relates to the immediate RTD area, there's an urbanized area being Denver, Aurora. And in as such, RTD is the designated recipient of those monies. Additionally, as relates to the urbanized areas that have come into question relative to Boulder, then there's Lafayette, Louisville, and Longmont. Those are designated to RTD. But recognizing that those jurisdictions have a population between 50,000 and under 200,000, that is funneled to the states for them to sign off and appropriate. So as we talk about funds holistically in reference to the monies at hand, the apportionments, they are drawn down through the Federal Transit Administration and may have qualifiers. So when we talk about 5307 funds, which are urbanized, those are formula grants based upon the population. And in this instance, with these one-time funds, this has been done in a different manner per se, relative to having adequate funding sources to alleviate transit of the adverse impacts of which transit agencies across the country have experienced due to the impacts of the pandemic, and have been designated as rescue and relief funds. And so in some instances, you have discretionary funds. Oftentimes that urbanized areas are available to receive through a competitive process where application is submitted and there's qualifying criteria in which to do, and then there's formula funds. So I believe that the confusion here in this instance with the American Rescue Plan Act, we've always had instances where we receive money or not receive, but be eligible for money in this realm. But I think in relationship to needs and everybody wanting to provide transit services, because let me just say, being in this business for 30 years, it is frustrating that I, as leading this agency, can't deliver the optimal services because of extenuating circumstances that are out of my control. So as we go through the grant apportionment process and things of the like, we do work in earnest. I saw in the chat where it talks about there needs to be an equity plan that would be seen. That would need to be done by Boulder County if in fact they are eligible and are qualified by FTA to become a direct recipient. So I just wanted to qualify that for everyone's edification. I hope that helps somewhat. It was very high level. But perhaps at a subsequent meeting to get more detail, the FTA would probably be better suited to address, the nuances.
Thank you. Appreciate that response. It's complicated. And I think when we're taken by surprise by articles in the paper, there's some suspicion there or some mistrust. Appreciate you giving the clarity that you've given on that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Kathleen, go ahead.
I just want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning and participate in this conversation with you all. And from the Boulder County perspective, this has really been an effort to work collaboratively with the county, with RTD, with CDOT, with the Federal Transit Administration, and with the local communities to find a path forward. This is a unique situation with these particular dollars for these particular urbanized areas. And it's a space that we're all learning about as we go into that work. And we know there's a lot of steps in front of us. And so we're learning as we go. Anything we learn through this process, we're glad to share with our colleagues on how these processes work. And so it's truly, the intent is cooperative and collaborative and finding a path forward to work together to restore service and serve our communities. And as was mentioned by one of the other board members, there's so much that we need to work on together to grow resources for transit. And I know RTD is doing everything they can in the region, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with all of the RTD staff and board members to move this forward together. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks, Kathleen. And I do see a question in the chat from Senator Hickenlooper's office about, can someone speak to the timing and the review process through FTA?
I can give you the process as a very high level in relationship to what has to be done.
Sure.
So first and foremost, as we prescribe, recognizing that the governor of Colorado must provide a letter concurring with the addition of a direct recipient. So the governor has to concur that Boulder can become a direct recipient. And this has to be done through an established metropolitan planning process, which would be DRCOG. There needs to be a coordinated effort with DRCOG, impacted cities, counties, and transit agencies being RTD. And this would have to change in the sense that RTD as of 2010 was a designated recipient as prescribed in correspondence that the former governor had put forward. And that would need to be updated. The second step is any grant application to utilize these funds must include an explanation of how the $34.2 million in ARP funds will be distributed for transit services in the 3 UZAs, which transit operators will receive the funds and the eligible projects for which the funds would be utilized. Then the FTA must make a determination on any new grantee's financial and technical capacity to carry out a grant award before approving the grantee's application. The next step thereafter is that the ARP funds must only be used for operating and payroll purposes if a recipient has furloughed employees since March 27, 2020. Then the direct recipient would be responsible for meeting all of FTA requirements, including grant administration, National Transit Database reporting, including all the federal requirements that I specified, the Civil Rights Act, you know, the service equity from Title VI, ADA, and things of the like. And then it would also be subject to FTA's triennial or state management review, which they come in every 3 years to ensure that you're adhering to the federal requirements as prescribed. And I just want to clarify, if CDOT, Boulder County, or any entity becomes a direct recipient for future Section 5307 funds, it must follow the same process as outlined. So recognizing there are a lot of steps, I can't speak to the timeline, but having been in this space for a number of years, it could, you know, be a few months to a couple of years. So that concludes my response to that question at a high level. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Any comments or questions from anyone? I know I have a few, but I'll wait and see if others do. And it looks like Director Davidson has to head out. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for having us. I'll just say what I said in the chat. Thanks to everybody for the collaborative spirit on this. It's a painful time, so collaboration is really important. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I don't see any other hands up, so I'll just try to say this as nicely as I can. And I'm sorry, Deborah, that unfortunately CDOT, nobody on CDOT can actually step up and speak to why this is going the way it is and that it all falls on you. But so how do we become an urban center, I guess, because we probably fall into all of that criteria. Number two, I guess, as usual, you know, the governor came from Boulder. We see money going to Boulder. We see the Front Range passenger rail going to Boulder. How long are we going to deal with this on this side of town? It's like we just don't exist. So, you know, I think we fall into the criteria for the population. We're certainly under 200,000, all of our cities on this side of town. North Glen is even smaller. So it just makes no sense, as usual. I don't see anyone from congressional aides or anybody on the phone. I see senators. So hopefully they can take this back to the federal level with FTA funds and try to help us figure out what do we need to do to get classified as whatever it needs to be so that we also get funds and end up in the paper saying funds will be withheld if service isn't restored, because we're still getting those phone calls. All of our residents call us frequently, can't get to the airport, 3 hours to get to the airport, have to go downtown, trains not working, bus is canceled, 122. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. So to hear that Boulder is going to get funding for some criteria that we know we fall into, it just doesn't really, it doesn't wash, I guess. I see Ron's hand up. Maybe he can give us some more information.
Good morning, everyone. Doug's probably going to kill me. I did not want to weigh in on this particular conversation right now, but I did want to clear some things up about the urbanized areas because I understand that's an important consideration for all of you. So the large urban area in the Denver metro area is the Denver, Aurora, Lakewood urbanized area, and you all are included in the boundaries of that urbanized area. And that is why RTD gets a specific apportionment of FTA Section 5307 urban transit funds directly allocated to RTD as the transit agency based on that large urban area. So you already are identified within that boundary of the urbanized area. There's the urbanized area boundaries are designated by the Census Bureau based on their process and based on each decennial census. So the last time those urbanized boundaries were identified and adjusted was based on the 2010 census. And now that the 2020 census is completed, Census Bureau is going through that same process to evaluate urbanized area boundaries again. But you already are within an urbanized area boundary. The Boulder, the Longmont, and the Lafayette-Louisville or small urbanized areas are not included in the big Denver, Aurora, Lakewood urbanized areas, so that they are smaller designated urbanized areas. And as Deborah explained, under the 5307, the Section 5307 funding program, there is an apportionment of Section 5307 funds that's apportioned to the state through the governor for those small urbanized areas. The large urbanized area portion of those funds gets allocated directly to RTD. So I just wanted to add a little bit more detail about that process.
Thank you, Ron. Any comments after that clarification? So I guess, you know, we all have the same fight for the same pile of money, but it feels pretty similar to what it's been for years, that we're basically up against Denver and Boulder in the middle. I don't know how we get away from that, but it seems like that's just the setup again. So I guess we'll just end it with that and move on. So next item is item 8, the TIP call for projects discussion, and I believe Doug is here to discuss.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everybody. I am going to turn this to Ron because no one knows this better than Ron right now. But I will like to point out, and I'm sure we got some veterans on the line here that've been through a couple TIP cycles, but yeah, a creation of a new transportation improvement program. There's some excitement, but I know there's a heck of a lot of anxiety associated with it too. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide just a quick update on where we are with this plan. As I'm sure Ron will point out, the sub-regional forums that were created in the last TIP cycle will provide a very critical role in the formation and ultimate selection of projects for this transportation improvement program. And we've been so pleased with the progress that the sub-regional forums and the continued working relationship that the forums have continued since the TIP was formed 4 years ago. So I'm going to turn it to Ron real quick, just to give a quick presentation, and myself and Ron will be available for questions. Go ahead, Ron.
Morning, everybody. Ron Papsdorf, Director of Transportation Planning and Operations at DRCOG. Happy to be here this morning to talk about the Transportation Improvement Program. First of all, I just want to apologize for the spelling error on this first page. It must have been a Freudian slip. Thinking about Oktoberfest and October being October. It's a little early, but maybe not too early. So thanks again for being here. I got about 3 or 4 slides. I'm just going to walk through a little bit of process. As Doug said, we're working through the development of the policy that will guide the development of the next TIP cycle. Carson, you can go to the next screen. Just for a little bit of background, the last major TIP process covered the fiscal years 2024 through 2020 through 2023. I apologize, we pulled this together pretty quickly. That was adopted in August of 2019. So those 4 fiscal years through fiscal year 2023. The current TIP covers the years 22 through 25. And again, we just do that to align every 2 years with the statewide transportation improvement program. We don't do a big call for projects. We only do the big call for projects every 4 years when we adopt a new 4-year TIP. So the TIP development process really starts with reviewing the existing policy that guides the development of the TIP. We review the overall process, priorities, criteria, working with all of our regional partners and local partners, and review the available funding that we expect to have over the 4 years of the TIP cycle. So we've been having those conversations for about, the last 6 months or so. We did a big review of the last TIP cycle. We did a survey with all of our partners and reviewed that process. And we've been having a series of conversations with the sub-regional forums and with our Transportation Advisory Committee to kind of review issues. And we're honing in on sort of a final proposed policy that will guide the development of the next TIP. But we don't expect to finish that until December or January. So we still got a little bit of work to do, a little bit of details to iron out. Mostly things are staying the same, right? So the dual model process that was used in the last TIP cycle, where there's a portion of funds, 20%, that's allocated through a regional process, and 80% of the funds being allocated through a sub-regional process, working with the sub-regional forums. So that will stay the same. Most of the policy components, some with some adjustments and tweaks around eligibility, the evaluation process, criteria, that's largely all staying the same. There are some things that will change or are likely to change or might change. Funding definitely is changing. There was an infusion of new funds through the Multimodal Options Fund program that was funded through Senate Bill 260 at the state level. We have a pending federal infrastructure bill that could change funding levels somewhat significantly if that gets passed. We're also looking at replacing the 3 TIP focus areas that were identified in the last TIP policy structure with the 6 RTP emphasis areas that were identified during the development of the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. And then we're really working with folks to add additional or strengthen some considerations, particularly around project readiness, to make sure that we're funding projects that are ready to go. It's not helpful when projects sort of sit that are allocated funds and then they can't actually deliver and utilize those funds, because that ties up funds that could have gone to other projects. So we want to just, I think, beef up our consideration of project readiness in the evaluation of applications. We're definitely looking really hard at how we can strengthen. We've always considered air quality in our evaluation, but we're looking at ways to strengthen that, particularly in light of the pending state greenhouse gas emissions reduction rulemaking. And then we're really looking at ways that we can strengthen and improve sort of our equity considerations in the TIP process. Next slide, Carson. So there are some, as I alluded to a little bit, the multimodal options fund issue, there's some issues that are sort of out there that might impact sort of how we actually develop the next TIP cycle. So the good news is a significant infusion of new funds through Senate Bill 260 through the multimodal options fund program. But those funds do raise some issues. So that under state statute, those funds require a 50% match of non-MMOF funds to be able to utilize them. And there are specific eligibility criteria around those funds. Also, the way Senate Bill 260 was structured, those funds are heavily front-loaded with federal American Recovery Plan Act monies. So that, and those monies have some really tight schedule requirements. So those ARPA monies under federal law have to be obligated by the end of 2024, calendar year 2024, and spent by the end of 2026. And that's pretty quick when we're talking about allocating those funds through our TIP process. We also have some uncertainty around the funding. As I said, the federal infrastructure bill is still pending in Congress. The House hasn't taken action on that. And that funding bill would provide us some additional, not only additional money than what we would have expected for fiscal years 24 through 27 for that next big TIP cycle, but also the way it's structured, some additional money than we would have expected for fiscal years 22 and 23. And then last but not least, obviously, the pending greenhouse gas rulemaking at the state level and the update to our 2050 regional transportation plan that we are required to complete by October of next year under Senate Bill 260. Those things sort of add some additional complexities and considerations as we look to developing the next TIP cycle. Next slide, Carson. So some goals that we've identified for sort of approaching how we'll develop the next TIP and the process for that are, we really want to maximize the opportunity for all of you and the region to meet those spending timeframes for the federal ARPA money that compose a significant portion of the multimodal options fund. We want to maximize the potential to leverage those monies with other similar projects that can be funded with specific funding categories. We want to definitely integrate, we will need to integrate the greenhouse gas rule provisions once they get adopted into the next TIP cycle. We want to integrate the outcomes of the review of the 2050 RTP that we'll have to complete next year. And to do all of those things, the proposal that we've developed is to really conduct future calls using two tracks. So if you recall from the last TIP cycle, there's the regional share and the sub-regional share processes, but within each of those processes, we basically do one call for projects, and we basically make available all of the funding we expect to have available, regardless of which pot of funds that money comes from. And then once we've selected projects, we sort of work to match up the color of money with the right projects in cooperation with the applicants and the project sponsors, and considering the eligibility for those programs. Because of the ARPA money, because of the emphasis on greenhouse gas emissions and our goals for air quality, and to try to maximize the opportunity to leverage the state multimodal options fund with federal funds, we're proposing this 2-track system. So within the regional share and within the sub-regional share, we're proposing that we would have sort of 2 tracks of calls. So kind of 2 separate calls, and applicants would sort of select their project based on the eligibility for those programs. So the first program would be air quality and multimodal. We would use the multimodal options fund, the congestion mitigation and air quality funds, those are federal funds, the transportation alternatives funds, those are also federal funds, and then carbon reduction program funds. And that's a new funding program that's included in the federal infrastructure bill. So that's only if that new bill ultimately passes and we have access to those funds. And the requirement would be a project sponsor would have to provide 20% local match for the total of the federal funds component. So how this accomplishes the leveraging, half the project cost would be multimodal options fund money, because those require a 50% match. And then the combination of the federal funds and the local match for those federal funds would complete the funding package for that project. So in essence, the project sponsor ends up being able to match the total project cost at 10% instead of 20%. I know that's complicated, but hopefully that's relatively clear. The second track would utilize the federal surface transportation block grant funds for projects that are eligible under that program. Those are 100% federal funds, so those would all require a 20% match. Any questions on any of that? I know I covered a lot of ground there. And before I sort of get into schedule of milestones, I just wanted to make sure there weren't any questions on this piece.
Thanks, Ron. Looks like Commissioner Odoricio has his hands up.
Hi, can you guys hear me? All right, yes, okay, good. Ron, thank you. I just, as one of the DRCOG reps, we're making sure that we are asking the questions and make sure that criteria and other sorts of eligibility stuff, all the things that we talked about here are truly equitable. I think it makes sense to look at shovel-ready projects, but sometimes shovel-ready could also put us at a disadvantage if we didn't have the funds before to have things already designed and ready to go from a few years ago. So we're just going to do the best we can to try to make sure that the North Metro area can actually still be eligible for as many funding for projects as possible. So I just need us all to keep working. Ron and the team are working, I believe, really well with us and everyone to try to maximize our ability to get funding. So I think that's a good thing. But there are a few times where we may have to say, look, make sure that whether it's the greenhouse gas rules, make sure that they're inclusive so we can participate and not just be penalized if we don't do things exactly some of the way some of the other communities that have a little bit more mature transit and other employment hubs have. So we may be needing to work together on this stuff, but I just wanted to say thank you to Ron and the team at DRCOG.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And Doug.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also would like to show my appreciation for Commissioner Odoricio and his comments. Yes, he's right. And I think with regards to the project readiness, Commissioner, I think it's one of those things we want to make sure that what people are applying for is the right phase of the project, right? So if you're looking at a possible construction project and, right away and or environmental hasn't been done, maybe it's a situation in which you should apply for maybe monies associated with environmental or something, you know what I mean? Just something like that. But if the project can proceed and accelerate to the point that it can be completed by the end of the TIP, then of course that is a logical project and should go forward. I just wanted to point out on this slide for Ron that this is just an introduction to DRCOG board members that are on this call. We will be having a conversation specifically about this 2-track option at the board work session next Wednesday. So the packet went out yesterday, so there'll be additional information in the packet associated with this. I will say that I'm truly appreciative of the innovative approach staff has taken to try to limit and lower the amount of local match that needs to be provided for some of these projects, utilizing other federal monies to match the multimodal options and mitigation funds. So I'll be very interested, and I'm sure we'll have a lively discussion at the board work session next week. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Rodericio's question, I want to emphasize that again, all of these none of these considerations, none of our criteria are sort of pass fail. They're part of a full spectrum of considerations when we're evaluating collectively, really together, projects that are competing for these limited funds. So we want to fund the best projects in the region to help our local communities achieve their objectives within the regional objectives that have been identified in the RTP and in MetroVision, right? And so it's really about trying to distinguish between projects. None of these criteria, none of these evaluations are pass fail. They're all just indicators to help us all make the best decisions we possibly can to allocate these limited funds. All right, Carson, I think you can go to the PDF real quick, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, let me just fix my share. 1 sec.
So I just wanted to, while Carson's bringing that up, and I'm going to apologize because this is probably going to be pretty small for you to see on your screens, but I just wanted to show you all some of the information we'll show to the board next week on sort of the process options, given all those goals I described, given the sort of 2-track process, and given all of the considerations around the greenhouse gas rulemaking and our required RTP update process we have to undergo next year, we're really proposing sort of to develop the next tip through kind of a sequential process. So we've got multimodal options fund money that's allocated through Senate Bill 260 that starts before our next tip cycle. So remember, our next full 4-year tip cycle would cover fiscal years 24 through 27, those 4 years. But the way Senate Bill 260 was structured, we actually are going to have multimodal options fund money to allocate beginning with fiscal year, well, now, and federal fiscal year 22. So we're going to have money earlier. That's also true under the federal infrastructure bill. The federal infrastructure bill would give us additional money beginning in federal fiscal year 22, October, which began October 1 of this year, not to be too complicated. So to allow us time to get through and adapt and incorporate the greenhouse gas rulemaking, and to allow our 2050 RTP update to move forward, and to make sure that we can allocate those multimodal options funds and potentially new federal funds in the early years, starting pretty quick, and meet the timeframes for the federal ARPA money that's wrapped up into the state multimodal options fund program. We're proposing to sort of do a sequential process. So starting in January of 2022, we would do a regional share call just for the air quality and multimodal options fund track for fiscal years 22 through 25. So kind of aligned with our current existing tip, which is the 22 to 25 tip. That's roughly $50 million worth of funds. And then once we got mostly through that process, then we would kick off the sub-regional share process for the air quality and multimodal options fund money starting in the spring of next year. So that would be the sub-regional process you all are used to, but it would be for that air quality multimodal options track. And there would be about $196 million or so available for that track. So once we completed that process, our board selected projects through the regional share and the sub-regional process with our sub-regional forums. We would amend those selected projects into the existing tip about October so that project sponsors can get started, maximize the time frame they have available to actually get those multimodal options funded projects completed and meet those spending deadlines of the federal funds. Then starting in about October of next year, we would start the process for developing the next piece. So we would start the regional share for all of the SDBG funds that would be available from 22 through 27, and the second track of the air quality multimodal program for fiscal years 26 through 27. And then we would kick into the sub-regional share process in about February of 23. All of that would culminate with preparing the next full 24 to 27 TIP, which would be adopted, around November of 2023. So that's kind of the approach we're proposing, and we've talked to our TAC with, and we'll talk to the board next week about. The alternative process is sort of more of a parallel process that also would start in January, but it would kind of cover both tracks at the same time for all years, the regional share and the sub-regional share. We would do an amendment to the existing 22 through 25 TIP in about December of next year. So we lose a few months of opportunity for project sponsors to sort of get those multimodal options funded projects going. And then we would prepare the TIP and adopt a TIP in about April of 23. So again, the reason we don't think that that's the best approach is because of the complications of the greenhouse gas rulemaking and our required update of our RTP. We think we should get through those processes before we launch into the bigger full sort of TIP process for 24 through 27. That's all I've got, and happy to take any questions or entertain discussion on that.
Thanks, Ron. I don't see any hands up. I do appreciate you guys coming in this morning to explain all this. I know it was a pretty lengthy discussion last week at the DRCOG meeting, so hopefully that helped. I know several of the members on this call were also had some questions last week. So it looks, I did see Commissioner Odoricio had a thumbs up symbol a little while ago, so that's good. So I guess, yeah, I don't see any questions or comments. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And so that puts us at item 9, our last item for the Federal Boulevard Study Recommendations presentation by Deborah Baskett. And a couple others it looks like on there.
Thank you. Carson, are we ready to share the screen?
We are. Let me make you the host. We're going to make Deborah the host so she can have an interactive presentation this morning.
While Carson's doing that, I'll say good morning. Nice to see many of you that turned your cameras on. I am Deborah Baskett. I work for the City of Westminster, and I'm the Senior Transportation and Mobility Planner. And I see in the square right next to me is Tim Williams, Federal Heights staff. And who's not with us today is Chris Chauvin, who was the third member of our Three Musketeers in doing this project. But I do see there's Adams County staff and of course commissioners on this call. So it is my honor to tell you about the project that Westminster, Adams County, and Federal Heights have been working on together. So Carson, cue me here. Do I click share screen?
You do. You're good to go, Deborah. If you click share screen and then select whichever one you want, should be good.
What do you see on your screen, please?
Looks like the website, the interactive website. I see.
It says welcome.
It does.
Okay, terrific. Thank you all. So Tim, you flag me down if you want to jump in on any of this, but I think it's important to set the stage in that the Federal Boulevard corridor study is the geographic limits are from 120th, which is Federal, and 120th is the Broomfield boundary of the study. And then the south end of the study is at 52nd and Federal Boulevard, which is the Denver city and county border of the study. So in between that is Adams County, Westminster, and Federal Heights sharing the space along that road. The road is owned by CDOT. It's their asset, their road. They make the decisions about it in cooperation with local governments, but they own the road. And then RTD is the service provider. They operate the B line, the G line, the critical bus route, Route 31, and then many connecting routes. So that kind of gives you the lay of the land, whereas the local governments manage the land use, the connecting streets, the trails, sidewalks, many miscellaneous things that are set up by memorandum of agreement. Tim, do you want to jump in or should I keep going with the interactive site?
Just keep going, Deborah. You're doing
All
great.
right, great. Okay, so what you should see on your screen is a welcome screen. We, like everyone else working during COVID, had to try very hard to reach people and get their direct feedback in a way that we're not used to. So our consultants, HDR, and FHU helped us do this really cool interactive website, and you are all invited to go in and make comments, and I hope I will attract your interest on why you should spend a few minutes on this site. So once we've welcomed you, and by the way, you can find this link on City of Westminster, Adams County, and Federal Heights websites, so I'm sure those are relatively easy for you to navigate to. So if we click on this first screen, it shows you the map, the boundaries that I was talking about, up here 120th, down here at the bottom 52nd. And we were able to do a pretty fine grained analysis in that we analyzed the segments by miles, by 1 mile segments. Pretty much covered this already, but I'm going to get into the study considerations and what was important. So let's see, that doesn't want to open for me. Oh, there we go. What's really exciting about this to a transportation planner or to a local elected official who has to pay money for improvements is that CDOT had scheduled a repaving project for a large segment of this roadway. As you can see on the slide, between I-70 and 92nd Avenue, a very critical portion of the corridor. They had identified that based on the structural condition of the roadway, and it had been in the queue for quite some time. So what that will include is repaving, curb improvements for ADA, and there are 110 to 120 curb ramps that will be improved through this project. Signal replacements, not new signals, but obsolete signal technology that will be upgraded at 4 locations. And one of the things I'm particularly exciting about is pedestrian activated crossing signal at 86th Avenue. You've probably seen these in other parts of the region where there's a traffic signal over the highway, but it only flashes when the pedestrian pushes the button. This is being proposed for 86th Avenue at Federal, where the Crown Point Academy School is. And we have a lot of crossing from one side of the street to the other because people don't go up to the corner and cross the streets. They go from point A to B. So it'd be a huge safety improvement. And then one of the things Chris Chovan has been a super strong advocate for are pedestrian countdown timer signals throughout the entire corridor. So in some places we take those for granted, but when you push the button and it goes 15, 14, 13, so that we're all well aware of what's going on there. So the key issues that the study team and we did have a stakeholder committee. Everybody wants to ensure that happens. And we had an interesting mix of people. We had some community organizations. We had one representing Alto, which is the low income housing project along Federal. We had a senior citizen that lives adjacent to Regis and Federal Corridor who found us and was a great asset to the project. And we also included our agency stakeholders, including RTD representatives and CDOT. Tim, is there anybody that I left off?
I don't think so, Deborah. You did a great job.
Great, thank you. So you can see on this slide, understanding the issues, safety, 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 safety. I say safety constantly because that is the fundamental backbone of everything we should be doing in improving the infrastructure in our cities and towns and counties. Transit, and you'll see a little bit more our pitch on why transit is so important. Bike and pedestrian, and traffic operations. Let's see, all right. So I want to go to the next slide. If you really wanted to, you could read the full report of existing conditions, which would tell you everything you ever want to know about this corridor. So the outcomes is where we get to, we're calling them outcomes, not recommendations. We knew we had to pay attention to people driving, which is the predominant way of travel, people riding transit, which this quarter, the Route 31 has remained strong through COVID. RTD has managed to keep the buses running on there. We are all amazed, those of us that use the corridor regularly or have gone out to be there on a couple occasions, the amount of people standing and waiting for the bus. It just is a vital service for the community. So we want to figure out how to make that even better so that we can move more people in the same space. So we talk about drivers and riders here. Pedestrians, again, safety, safety, safety. That corridor is such a mishmash of stuff. If you think of the northern area from 120th south to 92nd-ish, it has it has nice sidewalks. When it was redeveloped, they were separated from the street. It's nice curvy aesthetic path. So that is a blessing that comes with new development sometimes. As we go on the south end of the corridor, we have got just a patchwork of no sidewalks, walking in the dirt, RTD only being able to stick a pole in the ground essentially, which does not make for a very comfortable or safe boarding area. So what I wanted to remind the group about is that we are not just talking about walking on Federal. You have to get to Federal. So you have to walk on all those cross streets, 86th, 84th, all the way down the corridor. So we had a half-mile study area boundary where we tried to understand what the barriers would be for people to get there. Bicyclists, that was an interesting challenge for us. We did have a representative from Bicycle Colorado, and we did have individuals that were bicycling is important to them. So why would you want to ride your bicycle on Federal Boulevard? It's fairly terrifying. And the curb to curb right of way really is not conducive to adding a bike lane. So the way we approach this recommendation is to shift our focus for bikes to Lowell, which has already had numerous investments in infrastructure and striping, other safety improvements, and make sure that people can get there as improvements are made to the cross streets, and those connections are strong. On Federal itself, what we're recommending is wherever we can to get to a 10-foot detached sidewalk. And in our transportation planning knowledge, and probably your own experience, that makes a pretty comfortable space for people walking and people bicycling, not recreational bicycling, but you've got to get to work or you've come from your home and you're trying to get to a bus stop. It's very purposeful bike riding in that case. So that is what we're talking about. We do have freight on the corridor, and we would need to carefully design improvements to make sure that they're able to maneuver. And then we're, of course, very well aware of property and business owners. What could happen as we went along is there could be some changes to access, and we know that is terrifying and devastating to small businesses. So as improvements move forward, we would hold that as highly important thing. So now I'm going to show you the really cool part of the map, which is where you get to comment. So up here under Explore, I can click on search for location. So I could type in a location, but I really like the second study box better because it's for lazy people. So as I said earlier, we broke the corridor into 1 mile segments all along here. You can see that by the color coding. So you can click on a segment and you get a whole lot more information on that. So drilling, because here's something I learned so long ago when the W line was being planned. That was a long time ago. One of the things that City of Lakewood and their consultant did is they got a huge aerial map. It was the kind of stuff that you make maps of. And they had it laid out near one of the parks where they attracted the public to come. And what is the first thing people do when they stand on a huge aerial map? They go to where they live and they say, I found my house. That is a way to engage people to say, oh, that trail connection does not exist, or oh my goodness, this business is so run down there, I'm afraid to walk by it. So it's a pretty fantastic way to get input. Well, we couldn't get out there and lay a map down on the ground. So reflecting what we heard from people, you can see this cross section. And what is really cool is if you click on the numbers, which it's not doing right now, maybe I have to scroll. Oh, there we go. I just didn't scroll down enough. That will tell you that what we're saying specifically in that section is there's a missing sidewalk and we should improve that. I'm going to click on number 3. We looked at how do we manage the median, the turning space, and again, the safety. When you cross a really big road, it's really nice to have a pedestrian refuge in the median so you can pause for a minute and look around and breathe, especially if you're in a wheelchair or even on a bike. So I'm not going to go through everything, but then the really cool thing is if you, where's my comment button? Up here in the corner, this arrow is our comment form. So you can go in here and tell us what you think. and we can respond to you. Whoops, my personal email's there. We don't want to do that. And you could submit 20 comments or 1 comment because you only went to the location on the map that you care about in your daily work. Oops, I stopped sharing. Well, I'm going to stop there because that is, I have to tell you about CDOT's project. Again, so CDOT's resurfacing project, we have had an incredible collaboration with CDOT staff where they have included us in their meetings and we have included them in our meetings. And what we know is planned, and that can always change, is they plan to go to ad for this project in the winter of 2022, 2023, and they hope to be under construction in 2023 and 2024. So what is amazing and coincidental about our work is we were able to let CDOT know about some of the needs in the community, and to the greatest extent possible, they've tried to incorporate that, finding additional safety money to contribute to the corridor and just a really strong awareness of what the needs are. So what that will also do, and one of the things when I advocate for public improvements, is if you change the way the street, and I don't mean just the paving, although it's sure nice to have a nice service and nice striping and the signals functioning so that they're efficient. When you start to improve the curbs and the sidewalks, that affects how the corridor is perceived by people driving through it, walking through it. They look out, and instead of seeing a dirt path, they see a nice sidewalk and hopefully some xeriscape landscaping or something that is aesthetically pleasing. That's what I wanted to share with you. I encourage you to go to this meeting, share it with folks you know, and tell us what you think. Our next steps will be to take that feedback and finalize our report, and then hopefully work to seek some additional money. Working with Dr. Cog in the regional transportation plan, as you might know, that is where we bundle the money for fiscally constrained projects. And we do have a project line item there for $50 million, and it's for safety and mobility improvements. So now it's the job of staff and CDOT and RTD staff to work together to figure out what we could propose as first phases of implementation. Thanks.
Thanks, Deborah. Let's see if anybody has any questions or comments for the project. Must be a low coffee morning for everybody. Karen, go ahead.
That's a great, I'm excited about that. That's a great presentation, a great project. Smart Commute before COVID was working pretty closely with Regis University. And it was right before the G line opened as well. And we were talking about all the issues, the transit issues, the connectivity, the terrible unsafe conditions of people moving from east to west, west to east. All of that kind of stuff. And I know that Regis University has engaged with all of you to give you input from them, but was interesting to us because at the point that we talked to them, I don't think they were aware that there was this project going on or that would be going on. And their concerns were really the safety concerns more than anything, but the full complexity of what can happen here is really encouraging to me. And all the things that you just said, Deborah, about not just the safety and not just nice pavement and all of that, but the aesthetics that also makes it comfortable for people to be on the street. Because up until this study, there was no comfort of being on the street. It was a very scary thing to do. And you can see some of the development that's happened. They have a very nice Starbucks and some other things going on, and some nice development that really would lend itself well to street traffic. So thank you. That was a great presentation.
You're welcome.
And Smart Commute will put a link to your presentation.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Forward-facing website that we have.
Okay, and it is an open online meeting, so you have till November 8th to give us feedback, and we would love it. Anyone that wants to click on that, tell us what they think. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
And I see Commissioner, I see Commissioner Baca's hand up as well.
Good morning, everyone. So great to join you. Thank you, Chair, for calling on me. I would really like to thank the technical staff that is on this project. So I see Tim is on there, Deborah Baskett, Chris Chauvin, Brian Staley, Janet, and I think that this project shows what you can do in collaboration with RTD and as well as CDOT and leveraging those relationships. And this could not have been done without the technical staff support. So I didn't hear it in Deborah's presentation. The county commissioners heard this about a week or two ago. What was really interesting to me is that I know we complain, and I think Deborah from RTD is still on the call. I know we give them a very hard time up here up north that we're not getting our return on investment, what our citizens put in. Excuse me. And what we found out is through our staff report a couple weeks ago is that Federal Boulevard is the third heaviest traveled corridor for RTD. So I think that this is an opportunity for RTD as well as all of the jurisdictions along Federal Boulevard to lean in and see what we can do to not only improve but maximize the service and that travel shed there that runs north-south. I think that that's really critical for our residents. So I just really appreciate all the work that has been done and all the relationship and partners that are at the table to get this finished for us. So thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Baca. And I know, Tim, you had your hand up and you were going to weigh in on something else.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for calling on me. And Commissioner Baca took the steam out of one of the things I was going to say. I was going to talk about how Federal Boulevard is the third busiest corridor in the region. I was really surprised to learn that during the study. Another thing I was surprised to learn about during the study is that the projected demand for transit on this corridor is going to increase by 400% by 2040. So I know a lot of us have been talking about the limited amounts of resources and increasing demands for those transportation resources as we move forward. Federal Boulevard is definitely going to be one of those corridors to pay attention to in the next 20 years. And, I really appreciate the partnerships that have formed through this study, both with the city of Westminster and Adams County. I know anyone who knows Deborah Baskett or knows Chris Chauvin knows what dedicated transportation professionals they are and how much work they put into this. It's been a huge amount of work, but we also want to thank CDOT and RTD specifically for their participation in this study. And I really encourage all of you to go look at the Federal Boulevard Multimodal Study website. I put that in the chat comments for anyone to click on there. We appreciate your feedback.
Thank you, Tim. All right, Lisa, I see your hand up.
Hi, everybody. It's Lisa Huff from AC Rep, and I was just communicating with Deborah. Tim, Deborah, I'd love to have you at our board meeting next Thursday. I think this is a great project. It's such an important corridor for all our businesses, like you said, up in that region, as well as our residents. So we've promoted it on social media lately, but anyone else on the call who's doing something like this and wants to get in front of our board, please reach out to me in the future. Because we're here to help you and amplify and get more citizens involved.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Lisa. All right. I think we have no other hands up that I can see. So before we just wrap it up, any other questions or comments? I am not seeing any. So just a reminder that we do not have a meeting in November. And so we meet again in December. And we do have to vote on the slate of officers. We'll review 2021 accomplishments. The CDOT 10-year plan update and advancing Adams update is currently on the agenda. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving holiday.